everybody, welcome to the build portion of the Model Building Skills Basic. So this is a reminder that the main focus of this build was that you can build a car using the basic elements of a small kit to be able to actually do it. It's not going to be perfect, it's not going to be beautiful, it's not going to be the best thing in the world, and it's not going to win a show. But it's just to show you that you can do it. So I made a few mistakes along the way, but I had fun doing it. And with that, let's go ahead and get to it. Okay, so the main focus is going to be first you need to open up the box, which is here it is. And you're going to go ahead and look through the box and you're going to pull all the parts out, kind of take a quick look at them. What you're trying to do is get down to the instructions. Once you get down to the instructions, get everything else set off to the side. And we'll go from there. Also, please note that I ended up having to do a narration over the video because there was a hum in the background over the original recording. So I'm going to be narrating it. So there's the instructions. And that's the decals, which you'll see here in a second. Get this stuff out of the way. And here's a quick look at the decals. Very nice. Okay, and then at that point, you're going to go ahead and get everything cleared out of the way, open up the instructions, and quickly review the instructions. Okay, here we are basically the first step, which is going to be sorting them. But the big thing, I'm going to show you that you can use this basic Testors model cement to put it together. There's tips that you can put on it, but basically this glue is just, it works, but it kind of works. This is your hobby knife. Remember, it's very sharp, and I'm going to use this to start out with cutting things off the sprue just to show you can do it. It's not my preferred method. So one quick addendum is I ended up having to get an enamel set because when you're doing brush painting, you want to use enamels. I originally bought an acrylic set, so you can buy the same thing. It'll just literally be enamel paint. It's much better when you're doing brush painting. Okay. So at this point, I'm going to start out by trying to find the two engine components, which are 90 and 91, which are in that first block there. So I have to pull my parts over once I can find them. There they go. Identify them. There's those little tabs on the tree. And the thing is, you don't want to just pull them off of the tree because you can damage the parts. It's always in your best interest to cut the parts off of the tree. That way you minimize the amount of damage. The key is getting as close to the part as you can without actually snipping the part. So sometimes people will cut it farther away from the actual part and cut it on the sprue, and then they'll trim it up when they get it off. Here I was able to use the hobby knife and basically go ahead and get to the parts without doing any damage to them. So I was able to cut them off. Problem is, this blade is not the best blade in the world. It's kind of a very thin blade because it's a cheap hobby knife. So it's just not the best tool to use, but you can use it. And here I'm just focusing on trying to get to it. The part was a little bit thick. As you can see, it's a little tough to cut through. And it's like you want to try to get to a flat side and be able to cut it as flush as you can or cut away from the actual part as you can. Again, I'm not using a sprue cutter, I'm using a hobby knife. And of course it goes flying too. Okay, go ahead and get that out of the way. I want to quickly look at the part, just double check it, check for flashing, check the fit, put it together, see it fits together well. Like, there you go. Sorry it didn't focus. And then I'm going to glue it together. So the main focus is going to be to find the little holes, and hopefully the point will be a little precise, but it's not. And you're going to go ahead and put a little bit of glue where the holes are. You know, this is not very precise. Put that off the side, grab your other part, and go ahead and put them together, put the pegs into the holes. Then you have to squeeze and hold it until it sets. And literally need to hold about 5, 10, 15 seconds or so. That's all I'm doing here, is trying to hold it together. Seems like it's holding. Notice that there's a little bit of a flash line. Yep, a little rough. Grab some sandpaper here, and I'm going to go ahead and sand on that a little bit and try to smooth that out. realize that the hobby knife will work a little bit better. You can go either way, sanding sticks or hobby knife. Just trimming that off a little bit. Just double checking. Found a little bit more. Yep, you can see it. But I'm like, wait a minute, that actually might be a part that goes into another part. So you want to make sure you don't trim off a tab. But I know the oil pan is supposed to be smooth, so took that off there. Okay. Just doing some basic trim up work here to the engine. Just sanding it smooth. Just wanted to look nice. So just a quick note while you sit here and watch me sanding on this engine block for a bit. The thing is that, the engine's not even going to be displayed. So I'm doing the work on the engine and everything just to show you how to work on it and put it together. But if you're not going to display the engine, you may just need to prepare the block and then put that in and not even worry about any of the accessories or the parts or anything like that, just if they look at the side, but it depends on what you can see through the wheel well. If they have fender flares, you probably won't see anything. So the car can be what you want. You don't even have to build the engine if you don't want to, but I'm showing you the steps on it just to show you what it takes for this kit. But remember, you don't have to assemble the engine if you don't want to. Okay, so another trick to be able to apply glue like the cement is you can always use toothpicks. So if you have a toothpick, you can grab one and you can put some on a piece of paper or plastic or something like that, and you can use it to reinforce your seams. I felt that I just wanted to make sure this engine was going to stay together, so I went ahead and put a drop out there and used the toothpick. By the way, this pack of toothpicks I got from Walmart, and they're actually very cheap, so toothpicks are cheap. The thing is, when you're smearing this particular type of cement on the outside of the engine block like this, it's not capillary, it doesn't get sucked down into it, and it's going to end up leaving kind of like glue marks on the outside. Okay, on to the next section here in part 1 is getting all the rest of these parts off the sprue tree, and I'm using the hobby knife here, and I'm thinking, I don't like using the hobby knife for this, and bam, oh well, yep, I just broke the tip of the hobby knife. Okay, here's the thing. This little cheap hobby knives, they're more for scraping and trimming, not really that. But these are flush cutters, and flush cutters are going to be your best friend in the world for working with models. They can go anywhere from $10 all the way up to $50. So your main focus when you're using sprue cutters, and I get off camera a little bit, is you want to have the flush part towards your part, the flush part of the sprue cutters. And you'll notice I keep flipping the thing around because I need to get that flat part towards the part you're cutting off the tree. And some will actually cut it farther up on the sprue to get away from that part so you don't leave any or damage the part. Here I'm just double checking my part numbers, realizing that, hey, a couple of those are chrome, so they're going to be on the chrome tree. That's what that star is. As you see, like 109 with the star, that means it's a chrome, and I'm looking for it. And then I realize, oh yeah, that's a chrome part. So find my chrome tree. There we go. I need, looks like 92. Nope, I'm sorry, 109. There we go. And I found them. And again, flush side. Or if you're going to cut it off the sprue part, then you'll do it that way. And again, this is my first time filming and building models at the same time, guys. So I get off camera a little bit. Sorry about that. So all I'm doing at this point is just removing a bunch of the other parts from this section so that I can get everything ready to glue together. I found my next part on this tree. Realize, yep, that's it. They're in the right hand corner by my right thumb. And you get my sprue cutters. I'm gonna cut that off. Cut it a little bit close and realize it's a little funky, so I'm gonna try to cut it away a little bit. And then the second part, I really was like, I'm going to cut it off the thick part of the tree and not actually get near the part because it was weird angle. And that's why there's a big thick piece on it. And here I'm examining the part, realizing, yeah, I need to cut that part. So move these off to the side. Okay. Here we go. So you're going to get a better example of seeing you removing it when you have that big chunk left off to the side. And here we go. So in this way, you have a little bit better control because there was some parts in the way and I wanted to really make sure I didn't snip off a part I didn't want to snip off. There we go. And just examining the part, double checking it for burrs, things like that. Realize I can shave off some burrs using the hobby knife. You don't want to go too deep. Don't want to shave off features. At this point, I'm just going to spend the rest of the time cleaning up these parts. Sorry, a few minutes of time here to clean up all these parts and get them ready for assembly on the main block. So I got the heads and the valve covers and that intake manifold. So I'm just going to work on those for a little bit and get them cleaned up. Okay, after everything got cleaned up, I'm now checking the orientation on the block with the instructions, making sure I got it good. And I'm going to go ahead and check this intake manifold. See, there's a little nub there in the back. That's going to go into the hole that's on the top here on the block. So you want to make sure that your orientation is right, and that's why you don't take off little bits and pieces early in the stages. You got to make sure and double check your fit on everything. Looks like it's going to fit flush. Doesn't look like I'm going to have to do much fitting to it. Looks pretty good, actually. So should go together well. Now it's time to put the heads on, and the thing is, they are directional, and the angle goes a certain way. And you notice that on the top of the head there, it has a little lip that catches on that little trough there on the top of the block. So you want to make sure you get the orientation right, and there's basically a flat surface and then that little lip. Okay, I know I got it right, so I'm going to get my glue, and you can see that the glue's already gone like gooey on the tip. Got to smear it around, push a little bit more out. It's not very precise at all. Come on. There we go. Smear it around. Make sure my orientation is right again. There we go. Put it on. Double check the fit. You're going to have to hold it tight for a few seconds to get it to really bond. And it takes a few seconds. And actually for a bit, it ends up being to where it still moves around. Now I'm working on using a toothpick to apply the glue, because I remembered I could do that for the other head, for the other cylinder heads. And we're looking for that little lip. Making sure the orientation is correct. And while I was doing it, I made the other one actually slide out of place because the glue hadn't cemented yet. And that's the problem with that glue. It takes a long time to cement together, to actually like set. But I got it on there. There we go. Notice there was a little gap there, and it's like you could use putty or some super glue to fill in the gap if you want to. So that's another kind of more advanced technique. Okay, at this point, I decided I had enough fun with this glue. So pretty much it's like I was trying to put it away. I'm just tired of using it. The regular Tamiya extra thin cement is not that more expensive. It's only like $5.99 for a bottle. And that's what I'm going to show you here in a second. Okay, the light green cap is the extra thin cement quick setting, which grabs really fast. And then they have the regular green cap, extra thin cement. So the quick setting will grab faster, but I don't really need it. So I'm going to be using the main regular Tamiya green cap. Okay, at this point, I'm going to work on putting on the intake manifold. So go ahead and spread a little bit of glue in there and a little bit in the hole. Make sure my orientation is correct. Since I've got those heads on there, hold it on there, make sure it grabs. Double check everything. I'm going to go ahead and spread a little bit around that bottom seam. The capillary action will pull the glue in between the two parts, which is really cool. And it'll help it bond better. I'm just making sure I want a good solid connection. And there you go. Intake manifold is on. Okay, now I'm going to be working with the starter. And you can see there's a kind of a ledge sticking out, and there's a slot in the starter. So I'm checking the fit. Everything seems okay. So I'm going to grab my glue, go ahead and put some glue around that spot so it'll catch it. Grab the starter, take the slot, put it over the tab. There we go, tab. It's already pretty much grabbed, but I'm going to hold it for a second. I'm going to add a little bit more glue to reinforce, just to be sure. And that's it. Starter's on. This next tiny little piece is the mechanical fuel pump, and it's chrome. And the problem is chrome won't stick to styrene. Not without like super glue or something. So I'm having to sandpaper off the back of the mechanical fuel pump where the flat surface is. And it's going to attach to that flat surface there on the block. And it should be able to stick a lot better when you take that chrome off, because remember, chrome is not going to stick to it when you're using regular styrene and it's using quick cement. And I'm just trying to make sure it's on straight. It is a really tiny little part. And it looks like it's good to go. Here I'm just going to go ahead and add some more cement to it just to be sure, because it's flat surface on flat surface. Add a little pressure just to make sure. And that should be good enough. And there we go. Mechanical fuel pump is on. So at this point I went ahead and removed the next parts, which were chrome, and that's going to be the carburetors, which the carburetors are in two pieces. And at this point I need to do some cleanup on them. And as you're taking, cleaning them up by cutting these pieces of bits off, you're also taking part of the chrome off. So you got to think about that. You may either have to use a Sharpie or chrome paint or something like that to touch them back up again. But again, these are going to be under an air cleaner, so you're not even going to see the carburetors of this part of them. So, but just in case, I'm cleaning them up and everything, because it's just kind of attention to detail for this part. And that's all I'm doing for right now. What I'm looking for is edges and just, the extra sprue that's stuck out. Nubs, things like that aren't supposed to be there. Yes, they just trying to make them look like carburetors. So at this point, as some people may have noticed already, it's like I'm putting chrome parts on the engine without painting it first. Some people like to go ahead and paint all the sub-assemblies and everything first and then put them together. When you have super glue and other glues like that you have available, then you can do that kind of stuff. But these are the brushes that I'm going to be using to paint with. They're not the best brushes, but they're in the kit. You can paint with them. So I've just decided I'm going to go ahead and keep assembling the engine, and then I'm just going to try to paint really, really well. Because I'd rather have these parts stick to styrene than trying to stick it through paint, because it's kind of a pain in the butt. So that's your consideration: is do you build the sub-assemblies and then paint, and then put the rest of the parts together, or what? But the biggest thing is, don't forget, you got to take chrome off in most cases. So at this point, I decided I'm just going to go ahead and check the orientation on the parts. There's a little kind of a D-shaped protrusion, and that's going to go onto the top of the intake manifold there. And even though I said, hey, should take chrome off, I'm like, you know what, I'm just going to try it. It's been a long time. I'm going to see if this new quick setting Tamiya will go ahead and stick the chrome to the styrene. That small little piece, it wouldn't do it earlier. There just wasn't enough to grab, but I think there was enough here that, and I used enough glue that it actually caught it, as you'll see here in a second. See, that's the D. That's the little D-shaped protrusion that goes onto the top of the intake manifold. And here I slathered on a bunch of glue and stuck the D in there and then pushed it down. Surprisingly enough, it actually caught. So slid it a little bit, kind of got it to, just make sure it's set. Put the other base on there. Pop it in the D into basically the slot that's on top of the manifold. And I was actually surprised that the quick setting formula held. Kinda. Figured, just throw some more glue at it. If nothing else, it would loosen the styrene and kind of make it stick to the chrome. So at this point I was like, let's just see if we can get chrome to stick to chrome. Knew it was a long shot, but I was like, yeah, I'll just throw a bunch of glue at it and see what happens. Because quick setting's just a hair like CA glue, but not a ton like super glue. Put it on there. Held it on there like, yeah, pressure will work. Pressure, pressure, pressure. Pressure, pressure. Yeah, let's throw some more glue at it. It's not quite sticking. Let's throw glue at it. Yeah, that'll work. More glue. Do. Try. Pressure, pressure, pressure. Nah, not having it. Carburetor just laughed at me, said, dude, it ain't happening. Nope, no way. Not gonna stick. Pushed and all that, and it just was not holding. I was like, well, I'll just throw some more glue at it. Maybe that'll work. Do. Yeah, did that work? Nope, not at all. It was just like, no, it ain't working. Pressure, pressure, pressure. Perseverance. Yeah, it'll stick. Nope, still not sticking. It just laughed at me. I was like, nope, not gonna do it. I was like, okay, at this point, I'm gonna have to take some chrome off. It's the only way I'm gonna get it to stick. So, okay, so continuing to try to get these carburetors to stick, I had to sand off some more of the chrome. You can kind of see some of the white there that's exposed. That's plastic. Throw some glue on it. Take the other carburetor, that half, and stick it on top. Use some pressure, see if that's going to hold. And it's just not enough. So do some more work with it. I'm going to sit there and take some chrome off the other one. If you put it on a flat surface with a flat piece, basically it makes it flat, which is good. Throw some more glue on it. Because now it'll actually be plastic on plastic. Apply pressure. And there you go, it finally stuck. Finally got those two carburetors to stick, so just shortcut the process and take the chrome off, guys. Just take that off, makes it easier. And there we go. So next went ahead and took off just a couple of the parts from the tree, and I was like, you know what, I realized I can get this oil filter on here pretty easily, so it was a flat space on a flat space, put the glue on it, went ahead and put the oil filter on there, got it to stick. I was like, yep, that's good enough. Make sure it stays. A little bit of pressure. Put a little bit extra on there just to be sure. Yeah, it's good. Okay. So at this point, I was sitting there thinking about test fitting, the distributor, a couple other parts, and I was like, this is just fiddly. I'm tired. And I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to go ahead and take a break. And then I'm going to come back and do some other parts. And I'm going to go ahead and change out a couple of things. So I'm going to take a break. Okay, here we go. So now we're going to put together the headers on one of the sides. And it's a little bit fiddly, and there's like a little post that you got to put it into, the post and hole. I realized there was some extra material on there. There was like a little nub, so I had to scrape that off with the hobby knife. Remember, make sure and don't cut yourself with it. So that's always the fun part. After that, I basically put glue into it. Just got to hold it together and let the capillary action pull it through. Just making sure I got it glued well. And don't glue your fingers to it. Realized I needed to glue that upper part, make sure that it's nice and solid. And there we go. Okay, on the second set of headers, I realized that this part broke off when I was gluing it together because it stuck to my finger. So now I'm just trying to work on reorienting it, and it's mostly oriented, and I think it just dropped off. Yep. But I did get it put back on there, and I did get it glued together. Just took a couple of seconds and a little bit of tries to get it oriented correctly and make sure it stayed on. But ultimately, I get on there, and it's going to be on the side of the engine, down low on the block, and it's highly unlikely it's going to be seen anyway. So at this point, I realized that I can't really move forward with putting everything else together. I'm at the assembly point where it's told me to put the headers on. And if I do that, then I can't paint up the block and I can't paint up the other parts of the engine if I've got the belt and the fan and everything in the way. So I realized at this point, I need to go ahead and start painting some of it because it moves on to the chassis after this. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and start prepping to get everything ready to paint. So in order to do that, the first thing I've got to do is I've got to make some orange. So back at the 67, 68, 69 or so, they started to switch over to a red-orange. And on that part, what I was trying to show there is that try not to get the paint above where the bristles actually join in with the holder. So I use a sandwich bag and I put some red on it. And I realized that to make orange, I need red and yellow. So I add a couple of drops of yellow to it. Mix it up with my brush on my little makeshift palette here. And look at that, it's heading towards a orange. Realize I want it just a little bit more orange, so I got to add a little more yellow. And that's getting to a reddish orange, which is pretty much what the Chevy blocks were about that time period. It's probably a little bit redder than this, but that's fine. And that's compared to the red. I realized I want it just a little more orange, a little lighter, so I put a drop of white in it. And that will lighten up the orange and make it just a little bit brighter. And as you can see, I've already started painting the block orange. And I'm going to have to work on scraping some of that off around where the headers glue onto the sides of the block later. But this is not a precise brush by any means. It's a pretty crappy brush, but it's, again, showing you can do it with the kit. Here I am just painting up the block. Normally the oil pan would be color matched or a steel color. So I just color matched it. And I'm just working on painting up the details of the engine as far as the main block. And I don't want to paint that upper section where the headers, the valve covers are going to glue on. And I realized in this video you can see where I missed a couple little things. I need to get better glasses. So this is really small and I realized I missed a little bit. So in order to clean my brush, I use the back of the brush to put some thinner on the baggie, and then I just rub it around, get thinner in there, try to get the paint off the brush, because I need to switch colors. Remember, when you're wiping off on a paper towel, you want to pull, so you always want to pull it. So what I do is I wrap it, and then I push down on the bristles, and then I twist and pull it out, and it leaves a lot of that behind. And you just want to keep cleaning until you don't have any red coming off of your brush or any of your color coming off your brush anymore. As you can see, there's still a lot left. And just double check. You can smear it around on it. Not good for the brush, but I was just doing a quick check, and it's a crappy brush anyway. All right, so now I need a steel color. I don't have a flat, so I have to use silver, and then I just add some black to the silver. That will give me more of a steel color because chrome is in silver, that silver realm, and aluminum is in that realm. So steel is darker colored, so I added some black to my silver, and that gives me a steel color. So the intake manifold would either be a steel or iron, an iron or aluminum. In this case, I'm kind of going for a matte aluminum type look, and I'm doing the best I can with what I've got. And just painting the intake manifold right now. And again, not the best brush in the world. I'm really trying to be precise, but it's really difficult with this brush. And those parts I'm leaving white is where the valve covers are going to glue to, and I don't need to paint them. It was also the water pump there. Nope, there's the water pump. That's orange. Trying to get around where the carburetors are just in case, and then I remember that the air cleaner is going to go over top. You're not even going to see that area anyway. So you can choose to paint it or not, but the air cleaner, when you see it, literally it covers that whole section. It goes over top of both the carburetors. Okay, I've done what I can with that. I realized that the transmission would be aluminum colored or steel, so I'm going to go ahead and paint it using the same color in that realm of a kind of a matte steel or aluminum. And if your paint goes a little dry on your palette, you can always add just a drop or two of thinner to it and spread it around, and it'll reactivate it. And then it makes it easier to flow into the little cracks and crevices, especially like on this transmission. Not too bad. It's tacky to the touch. As you can see, it's coming off of my fingers. And guess what? Use a hair dryer. Hey, went and bought that at Walmart, cheap one. And that will help it flash dry to where it won't be quite so tacky, so it won't get all over your fingers. Okay, now I'm using black paint to paint up a couple of the accessories. I think that's a coil pack. That's the starter motor. Starter motor is supposed to be black. And I got a little bit on the pan there, see. Again, I don't have the best brushes in the world for this stuff, and it was really tiny, so I need to get better glasses. And again, it's on the lower side of the block in the vehicle. It's highly unlikely you're even going to see that part. Now, it doesn't mean you shouldn't be precise, but for what I'm working with, I just did the best I could. That brush just sucks. So the distributor, I wanted it red, the distributor cap, and that's what I'm working on here. So I'm not going to try to wire up this engine or anything because it's not going to be displayed. But I wanted a red distributor cap. And you can see, even with the hairdryer, it's still a little tacky. Technically, you would want to let it dry for a while. And actually, I think that's because it was where I was holding it earlier. And I'm just double checking. And then that belt, I was like, I'm going to try a quick little thing. And I pulled out my Sharpie. If you have a Sharpie, you could always use it, or you can use your paint. But a black Sharpie is a neat little tool you can use for some things like that. And I realized that the pulleys were going to be a silver to aluminum type color, so I went ahead and painted those up. Again, not the best brush in the world. And there are things and tools that you can use to hold these things to where your fingers are not getting all gooed up and everything. But again, this was just using the tools that are in the basic set. The whole premise is you don't need a million tools and everything in order to be able to do this. That was the whole basic premise. Okay, so I want to glue the headers on, and I've got to scrape off some of this paint on the side of the block in order to be able to glue those headers where I painted them earlier. Again, I don't have super glue or CA glue. They're both basically the same. So I've got to scrape it off or sand it off. That's all I'm trying to do, is prep the sides of the block for the headers. Did a little bit of test fit with it. I'm going to go ahead and try my quick setting glue. And there were some hot rodders back in the day that actually had a hot rod white that they paint the headers. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to leave it that way for contrast. So, and it's not holding very well. I realized, okay, you know what? There's one thing that old school cement that from Testors is good for. It will literally eat through the paint. It makes this goo that will help the header stick to it, and it kind of messes the whole thing up, which is pretty cool, but it'll stick. I realize at this point I'm just going to use the glue that I've got. So between that and the quick setting glue. Okay, I got both the headers glued on, and actually there's a problem. I lost some of the footage. I thought I'd recorded it when it didn't. That's why you see the air cleaner on top and the fan on the front. So sorry about that, but now you can see the parts that are covered up by the air cleaner. And I got the valve covers on too, so I'm sorry, but that footage was lost. So valve covers are on, air cleaner's on, fan is on, and I'm just trying to get these headers to stay on. And there we go. I put it upside down. So a little addendum here. Again, I lost some of the footage, and I wanted to test fit the engine into the chassis, and when I did so, it literally press fit in because the headers held it in place. It kind of locked it in place. So I'm like, well, I'm not going to pull it back out because it was holding really good. I'm thinking I'm just going to go ahead and glue it up. But Got that part done, moved on. Next one is going to be your front brace along with the radiator and the cooling fan and a couple of parts that go on there. So at that point I was just test fitting. Looks good. Go ahead and glue it up. There's posts on the radiator that fit into the holes on the brace. Just trying to make sure I got it oriented correctly and lined up correctly before I stick it together. Make sure up is up and down is down. There's two places for two hoses. There's an upper hose and a lower radiator hose, and I just wanted to make sure they were oriented correctly because the upper radiator hose goes to the water pump and the lower radiator hose goes to the block. Okay, that went together pretty well. Realized I needed to get the fan shroud on. Do a quick test fit. Double checking everything. Sorry it got off camera. Realize it's good and it popped in, the little post popped into the holes and it fits really well. So I'm going to go ahead and glue it up. These pieces actually fit together really well. Okay, that's pretty good. Put a little bit more glue on just to be sure. And there you go. Looking pretty good. Okay. So this front piece is the hood latch. Took a little bit to get it oriented, but then I got it finally figured out and popped in there by looking at the directions, and it was like, bingo, there it is. Glued it up. But that's again where the latch for the hood. Just getting extra paint on there, glue on there just to make sure. There we go, a little dab, dab, dab. Looking pretty good. Okay, the next piece is they gave you a simulated battery, which actually looks pretty good. I realized I should have detailed it up, but I just remember that I don't have the tools to do that. It's really tiny, and I just didn't trust it with what I had. But there's a slot in the battery itself that goes on what I'm just going to call it the little ledge there on the brace, and it glued together really well, and it fit together really well. Actually, it's a really nice detail piece that you could really do some good detail in the engine block with it. Put a couple of wires coming off of it, a couple of terminals. On the other side there, and there's just a better look at it so you can see. And it fits into that slot really well. Okay, it also came with a windshield washer fluid reservoir that was clear. So that way you can use a transparent color on it to make it look full. I actually used a blue Sharpie on it to make it look like it's some kind of a windshield washer fluid. And again, if you had time and all the money and your commitments, time and everything, you could put a hose coming off of it to make it look like, it's an actual little holding something. Okay, here I'm just double checking the fit on the front of the vehicle, on the front of the car. And actually it fits in pretty good. It rests on the inside of the fenders there, and it's got a couple of nubs that it rubs against. But I realized that I can't paint it because the fan's on the inside, and if I got it all connected, then I can't paint that fan shroud and I can't paint the radiator. But I realized also I needed to make sure that the hose is lined up that they provided. So there's a lower hose on that left part, and then there's an upper hose that comes off the right. And I thought, well, I could probably go ahead and glue that up. And as you can see, there's the hole. And it needs to angle up just a little bit. And again, this is a detail that most people will probably never see. But I glued it in that direction, so that way when you fit it over, it would be aiming at the block. And it might actually be going up towards the water pump. I'm sorry, that goes up towards the water pump. The other part goes to the block. And there I'm putting on the upper radiator hose. The front part is not glued on. I'm just gluing it in position. Okay, moving on to the chassis. So I'm test fitting the exhaust here to see how it goes. As you can see, it's going to fit into the headers there. And what's interesting is that they crisscross over each other and they go underneath the rear axle. So there's a pin where my forefinger is there on my right hand, that they fit together. They fit into the back of the headers. As you can see, there's the two little posts, and then that little brace right there glues together. And in the back, there were two holes that the two posts on the one set of the exhaust will go into. They glued together really well. There you can see where I'm fitting them into the rear of the headers, and I'm going to glue that up. And I glued, there was an engine mount right there that I had to glue on earlier, which I did. Plus I glued on the chassis parts, which again, there was lost footage, so that front of the chassis had to be built where the A-arms are in the front wheel hubs. Just gluing up the back of the exhaust, making sure, because it fits into a couple of slots and a couple of posts and holes. Just making sure it's all nice and tight. It's a little fiddly, so you got to mess with it a little bit, get the glue in there to get it to catch. And again, I'm just double checking the fit and everything, make sure it's right. Looks like I've got it solid. It clicked in. Go ahead and glue it up. And when you're looking at the part and everything, you'll see where all the posts are and everything. Again, this is my first time video filming or filming while I'm building a vehicle, so it's trying to get used to that. Okay, basically putting on the rear leaf springs. Pretty much your rear suspension. Glued together really well. Get some glue on there. Here's a post. Here's a hole. Put it together. Make sure they're straight. You want to make sure they're straight, kind of going horizontal and vertical. Once they look good, time to put it on the vehicle. There's holes that they fit into at the ends of them. All you gotta do is put them in the holes, match them up, glue it down. Now others would have already painted the chassis, and then they would have started gluing all the parts on. But again, I don't have that kind of glue, and I didn't want to mess with it, so it's all going to be painted the same, roughly the same color anyway. There, I'm just putting on the rear shocks. There was a nice hole that they would go through, and then it would fit into the upper portion. There you see the post sticking through. Yes, they're supposed to stick through. And that's pretty much the chassis. Now on to the tires and wheels. Okay, looking for one. And it came with some flashing around it that I'll have to take care of. I'll have to sand that off. And there was one that was cutting the flashing off, and as soon as it focuses, I accidentally cut the tire. I took a chunk out of it. So that will be going to the inside and the bottom so that you can't see it. So the hubcap, as I'm going to call them, goes in one side of the wheel. I'm sorry, one side of the tire. Pops in. And then the backs go on, and that's what's going to go on the post that connects to the vehicle. Here's the thing. I messed up putting the second piece in on 2 or 3 of them, so they were backwards, and I didn't realize it because they were very thin, and the directions weren't the best. So when I actually go to put the tires on later, the wheels on later, they are wobbly and all that, so I have to make some modifications. Wasn't happy with that part. You don't have to glue them together. They will usually stay together, but I was like, I'm going to go ahead and try to glue them together because I want the wheels to stay together. But you see that little flange there? I couldn't remember if it went the way I'm putting it in now or if I reversed it. So, and it wasn't very clear on the directions. So it looked like it should go pop in that way, and it should glue together. So anyway, just popping the other tires together. A little glue. See there, I reversed it. You got to pay attention to details, guys. So I messed that up. And at this point, I can't remember which way was correct. So, my fault. Pop it on. Glue. Put on your backing. And remember, sometimes chrome doesn't stick to styrene very well. So I technically should have sanded off the back of those, so that would have been white plastic. And here I'm using some sandpaper to take off the, there's like a flashing that's left on the tires. And there's a better trick to do this, which I will show in another video. But again, this is using the basic tools that you have. So if you do a rounded motion, you'll see where it's starting to sand it off, and it gives it a little bit of a road worn look. You want to get that flashing off there as well as you can. But don't go too deep, because then you take the tread off the tires and then they look like slicks. So, and I'm not going to show you sanding all of them. I just want to show you an example of it. Okay, and I realized at this point I need to start painting the chassis, because it was calling for assembling other parts and putting wheels on. I'm thinking, well, I need to go ahead and start painting the wheel wells and inside the fenders and everything. So that's what I'm working on. And sorry that I drifted off camera a little bit. So I zoomed the camera in for the second section, and I got off camera a few times. Again, first time building a car while filming it. And I'm not going to show painting every single stroke on the chassis, because it took a while to paint it with this brush. And you got to do a lot of painting to get every nook and cranny. But again, it can be done. And it should be flat black anyway. So again, I lost a lot of footage on the painting of the vehicle and everything on the chassis. So sorry about that. But I did the best I could with what I had. And I'm just continuing on. So now moving on to the interior, I figured out it was easier to paint these interior door panels, and I finally figured out my color scheme. I wanted a red vehicle, a red car with black stripes, and I wanted a color matched interior, so I went with the red interior with black accents. And again, sorry it drifted off the camera a little bit. I'm just painting the whole thing solid red at this point. With better brushes, you can do better details, like on the door handles, the armrests. You could really do some really intricate stuff with the right tools. Again, using these basic brushes, you're not going to get that. And again, there's methods you can use to do all the detailing, but this is about just building the car with your basic tools. And remember, that's what the focus is. A lot of people are going to be like, oh my gosh, you could have done this, you could have done that. And it's like, yeah, I could have. But the problem is I'm using the basic tools. I wanted to show that you can build this car with the basic tools, and it's not half bad. But this is kind of what you can expect. Okay, I got both the interior door cards painted up. And I'll let them dry for a while. So I already did a little bit of work on the interior. I went ahead and glued in the shifter because there's a piece that goes over top of it. And I painted the pieces on it. And this is the center console for the Camaro. And yeah, I realized I left a little bit of black there on the side, but again, you're not going to see it. But again, that's no excuse. But it's what I had, and it's what I was working with. So I'm going to go ahead and glue it down. I went ahead and put a little bit of paint down already, because I want to imagine it having black carpet with red seats. And actually, I did red and black seats. I wanted black insets, which you'll see here in a little. Well, I can't remember if that footage recorded it or not. But I'm gluing that center console in because it had to go over the shifter. And that's why that center part wasn't painted. And it's a little fiddly, so you got to get it on there and then let it hold. That's why I also didn't paint the very bottom of it, so it'd be plastic on plastic. But there was a little bit of paint in the way, so it slid around a little bit. Again, I just want to reinforce that joint. Just make sure. Okay, this is pretty much some of the interior. And then here I'm just doing more with the red, gluing the side cards in. Big thing with those side cards is push them all the way down to where that red lip is resting on the white, not standing up or anything. It took a little bit to push it down in there. And there I'm just working on painting. I painted up the carpet, and then I painted the interior red. And now I'm trying to make the seats do kind of red with black inset. Again, not the best brush in the world, but it did the job. Okay, so this is the end of part 1. I did finish the interior. Unfortunately, I lost the footage. So stay tuned for part 2. That's where I'll be painting the body and putting the car together and finishing the details. Thanks for being along on the ride, guys. Hang on.